Morning, everyone. In light of the fact that we've been discussing the battles of Verdun and the battles of the Somme, today we're going to go into a little more depth on things that happened during those battles, why they turned out the way they did, and some interesting inventions that came out of those situations. Now, in the Battle of Verdun, the Germans kind of realized the hard way that the helmets they were using, the Pickelhelm, which was the cap that just covered the top of the head, and that big ceremonial spike that the German helmets were known for, those really didn't work in terms of protecting the areas around the head. And so Germany had their engineers, or whatever they were called at the time, start making a new type of helmet, which they invented something called the Stahlhelm, which is a steel helmet. And that's where it came down with a low brim and came down with a covering, covered the ears and the back of the neck, completely shielding the areas around the neck and around the back of the head, which people would come to recognize German soldiers throughout the remainder of the First World War and through all the Second World War by. Now, moving back over to the Battle of the Somme, why some of the things that went so horribly for the British? First off, I told you how they were shelling the area for almost a full week. And when they got there, another big problem they had was that 1/3 of the shells, the British shells, were duds. Didn't explode. Now, this is not a reflection on British manufacturing. It was the fact that you had something that required a great deal of precision being made by unskilled labor. And so 1/3 of the British shells did not explode. And another thing was, when the British finally got across that field, those who didn't get mowed down by machine guns looked on in horror that they realized the German barbed wire was not affected by this, largely because of unexploding shells, and they just could not get past that barbed wire, which really slowed them down. So Britain was thinking of new ways to get around that barbed wire. And there was a new, I guess call it a secret weapon being developed in England. And they brought them out, and they were in humongous crates. No one knew what they were. They were top secret. And on the tanks, on the containers, it said water tanks. And you open them up. There was big machines with treads, with cannons on top. Yeah, and they kept the last part of the name as the name of the new machine, the tank. Now, those things moved pretty slow. They moved at about 3-4 miles an hour. Didn't go very fast at all. But when they first started out in 1916 during the Battle of the Somme, needless to say, they scared the daylights out of the Germans. They didn't know what they were doing. And plus, the treads on the tanks were able to run over and smash down German barbed wire. So that's how they proved their effectiveness. The problem is, though, half the time the tanks would crash, the engines would burn out, they'd stall. There's times like they'd get stuck in a crater and they couldn't get out. So in the beginning, it moved pretty slow. It didn't move very fast at all. Lots of trouble with the tanks. But by the end of the First World War, they had gotten quite efficient in the using of tanks, both the British, the French, and then the Germans as well. The Germans, as you know, would go on to use tank technology to great effect in the implementation of what's called the Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, during the next war. So tanks would be a vital part in that. So those are the few of the things that came out of that particular battle. And the main point of the Battle of the Somme, where so many British lives were lost, because it came down to at the end of the battle, there were over 320,000 British soldiers that passed away, that got the casualties rather, 200,000 French casualties, and upwards of 600,000 German casualties. And General Haig, in his report at the end of the battle, said that, putting it in my own words, that the whole point of that battle was to draw pressure off of Verdun and to keep the French in the war, which is what it did. It was able to keep the French afloat and to have the British take the brunt of that particular battle. One thing it did, though, it took the British from an amateur army into being one of the most efficient armies in the world after that. Never again were the British caught with their pants down like that. They knew how to make an effective fighting machine. They knew how to better test their equipment, so that problem didn't happen again. So those are the few of the things that came from the battles of the Somme and Verdun. There you go.